I may have gotten my planning system down to one book or two if you consider the weekly supplement a separate book, but my journaling system is a completely different story. Given that we are in the last quarter of 2025, I thought now was a good time to take stock of all the different books that I journal in and think of them more holistically in context of an overall journal ecosystem. So in this video, I'm going to explore my journal ecosystem with you, to chat a little bit about why I journal and the benefits that different types of journaling can have on my overall well-being. And then we're just going to explore what my journal ecosystem looks like, and I'll take you through each of these books that you see, and we'll think critically about how these all fit in together, whether there are any gaps, and what I might want to change for 2026. If that sounds like something you would be interested in, then I invite you to settle in, grab yourself a drink, maybe a snack, and something to keep you company and help you feel cozy while we hang out and chat about my journal ecosystem. I'm just going to move this out of the way. So my drink for today is a pumpkin spiced coffee, and I have to thank XOXO Lore for suggesting that I look into getting this silk oat dairy free creamer. She suggested it at just the right time because I was about to go grocery shopping and I was able to find this. It is a pumpkin spice flavor and it has pretty much fixed my craving for getting a pumpkin spice latte. So I am really enjoying this, and if you do see this brand, then I highly recommend it. And of course, I had to go with a pumpkin spice themed snack. So these are pumpkin spice cookies. It's a Canadian brand. So if you are in Canada, this is what it looks like. And we usually get a box or two of these when they pop up in the grocery store. So it might be a little extra to have a pumpkin spice coffee and pumpkin spice cookies, but it's that time of the year. I truly enjoy pumpkin spice things, and I'm just gonna enjoy it and get into the autumn mood because this is my favorite season and October is my favorite month of the year. Before we get into the specifics of my journals, I wanted to chat a little bit about some of the reasons why I journal. So I guess as a starting point, I know that I showed you quite a lot of books at the beginning of this video. And I wanted to start off by saying that I didn't start out thinking about having different journals and thinking about it holistically and having them all fit into an ecosystem. It really just grew organically over time. So I've always had a stream of consciousness type journal or diary. That is just something that I have carried throughout my life and started when I was quite young. And I guess over time, when I had an idea for something or when I was in the mood to start a new book, I would just add something to my lineup. I never really thought about it as a lineup or a system. But when I saw the word ecosystem floating around, I really liked the idea of considering how all my journals map out and fit together, just to see if they're meeting or maybe not meeting my underlying needs, which I haven't really thought critically about in quite some time. So when I think about why I journal, there are several reasons. I use it to sort out the clutter in my mind. I use it to vent. I use it to remember events. And I also use it to improve my overall self-awareness. I'll share some research studies that touch on the benefits of different types of journals because journaling is such a broad term, and I do think that there are very different ways that we can journal. And for so long, I was kind of on like a single track of journaling in a very specific way, which was having a blank notebook and just doing stream of consciousness journaling. It wasn't until I was back in school and making my career switch where I started to read more into the power of self-reflection and using journaling to build a greater sense of self-awareness, but also to serve as a restorative practice and to help with processing emotions and thoughts and different things like that. So I guess that's probably when I started to be a little more intentional with my journaling and think about broadening the way that I was approaching it. Having said that, I will say throughout my life, I've also engaged in scrapbooking. I didn't call it memory keeping until I discovered YouTube and I heard other people use that term. But I just called it scrapbooking, and that just served the purpose of documenting events. I thought it would be interesting to look at how others are conceptualizing it. I found one study that talked about expressive writing and how that can have a positive impact. I liked the distinction that they made about expressive writing, which is defined as a journaling technique that is focused on one's deepest thoughts and feelings. So when you sit down to journal, you're less focused on writing like this is what happened, and you're more focused on writing about how you're feeling about the event or what you're thinking about that event. Another study explored the long-term benefits of journaling over a 2.5-year period and how that had a positive impact on personal reflections and how that inspired change within the person. That was more of a case study, so take it with a grain of salt, but I liked the idea of journaling over a long period of time and thinking about the long-term effects of journaling. So not only are we thinking about journaling over a few sessions to process an event, we're also thinking about journaling over a long period of time and what impact that might have on us. Another study touched on the benefits of scrapbooking. So yet another type of journaling where it's not so much about writing or processing, but it's about how it helps us confront and honor our past memories, trigger nostalgia, and promote social connectedness. So there are so many interesting studies out there. I was just scratching the surface of it, but I will share the references in the description below if you want to take a look at any of these studies for yourself. The bottom line is I resonate with all of these different types of journaling, which is why I don't feel overwhelmed or intimidated by the fact that I have so many different journals ongoing at once. When it comes to planning, I definitely feel like I just need to have one book to capture everything. Otherwise, I will be disorganized and I will be overwhelmed very easily. But when it comes to journaling, the purpose of it is different, and each of my journals, I think, serve a different purpose. And also, I do want to acknowledge that journaling does have very many different forms. If there's anything that I took away from my initial search is even without the research, you can see in our community that there are so many different ways that people journal and so many different reasons why. And I just want to acknowledge that some forms of journaling can actually have adverse effects. For example, if someone is trying to process a really traumatic event, sometimes journaling can help with that. And other times it can just trigger negative thoughts and re-traumatize the person. So I hope you can take what I share as just my experience and know that not every form of journaling is going to have the same impact on everyone. So in case you're someone who finds journaling to be more harmful than helpful, then maybe that is just a sign that it isn't for you. And that is totally okay. There are other methods to process negative events and stressors or even trauma. And I encourage you to reach out to a professional if you are struggling to work through some of that on your own. Now I want to talk quickly about my thoughts and personal interpretation of a journal ecosystem. So again, I know this is a trending term right now, and when I saw it, I immediately resonated with it. This was a term that was also trending in my previous roles. Every team that I was working with seemed to be talking about a platform or an ecosystem. And it wasn't long before I was tasked with running a research study that explored a small business owner's ecosystem so that we could understand how building a product that we were thinking about building might impact their overall ecosystem. So what this involved was mapping out all the tools and apps and even people that they interacted with to complete the task that we were specifically trying to understand, just to see how these things were meeting their needs. And from our perspective, we were trying to figure out if what we were going to build would do a better job at meeting their needs. So by looking at everything they were doing for that task as being an interconnected system, we could anticipate potential gaps or maybe even see where one aspect covered some things and then was connected to something else that covered the rest of it. So when I think of an ecosystem, that's kind of where my mind went to. And when I think about mapping my journals as an ecosystem, I think about how they're serving a few of my underlying needs, which I would probably summarize as wanting to process experiences, building resilience or self-awareness, also like building resilience as a preventative measure as part of self-care, and preserving memories. Each of my journals don't do all the same job, but together they create a system that supports my overall well-being over time. For example, journaling about emotions and thoughts collectively about a traumatic or stressful event was actually more effective at promoting positive change compared to maybe only writing about feelings that are associated with the event, or just writing out the facts, like what happened leading up to it, what actually happened, what happened after. I appreciate it because it's a really good reminder of why I have different books that capture different aspects of the way that I might process something. So my 5-year is kind of like a facts only type of book, and it's really there to be sort of a long-term journal that covers the facts, but then my stream of consciousness morning pages is a little more suited to the emotional and the cognitive processing. So all of those things work together, but each journal has sort of a different focus. The last thing I'll say before I go into my show and tell is I found a really interesting article that looked into journal ecosystems in a slightly different way than I'm looking at it, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention because it might be interesting to you. So they looked at constructing a journal ecosystem that is shaped by materials, personal context, and the communities that they belong to. I think this is an even more zoomed out view of what an ecosystem could look like. So check out that article if you're interested. I will leave a reference to it in my description. For my mapping exercise today, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to focus on the journals themselves and what they are, not so much the tools like the pens and the ephemera and the stickers and that type of thing, or the communities around the journals. So now I'm just going to go through all of the different books, and I'm going to try to do this relatively quickly because I feel like I've touched on these journals at different points in my videos throughout the year, and I don't want to be too repetitive, so I'll give you a really quick overview of each of them. Okay, the first one is one that I just recently made a video about. It is my 5-year journal. It is a long-term journal, so it's mainly the facts for every day over the course of 5 years. So that's my 5-year journal. This book over here is my memory keeping journal. So this one is mainly to document the facts and to scrapbook. It has a nostalgic purpose. I have a weekly vertical that I use to put in photos that help me remember what's going on. And this is the only system where I actually put like photos of that represent events in my life. So I have a sort of weekly overview where I touch on highlights, and then I have a second insert where I document events in more detail and have more photos. This is the one that I use for my morning pages. But really, this is the replacement for my stream of consciousness journaling that I've always done. The main difference is now I put a little more effort into actually journaling every day, and I do also try to do this in the morning. So this is the space that I use especially for cognitive and emotional processing. It helps me clear the clutter in my mind. It helps me work through how I'm feeling, and it is a place that is designed for self-reflection, self-awareness, that kind of thing. So this is probably the most impactful journal that I have, and it's just because this is something that I have always leaned on throughout my life, and I have a lot of thoughts swirling in my mind at any given point in the day, and this is something that helps me have a place to get those thoughts out and clear my mind a little bit. Currently, I have moved into a A5 stylogy that I cut myself with an X-Acto knife, cut down to a TN size. I have not decorated the cover yet. I'm actually just enjoying this beautiful red cover that's plain, and I used an X-Acto knife to cut this, so it was very easy. I had a corner cutter, so I was able to cut the bottom. I still haven't done the top yet, and that's just because I thought I might do that on camera, but I haven't actually gotten around to that yet. So yeah, this is just pen only, and I'm just processing, I'm writing. I love this practice. Okay, the next one is a very new addition to my journaling system, and I have to thank Leanne from Leanne Likes for this idea, which I completely stole from her, and it is a Therapy Wins journal. So this is just an A6 cover that I got in 2023. It's from Hobonichi, and inside I have an A6 Hobonichi blank notebook. And I'm calling this my Therapy Wins book, and it's just a space for me to document moments that are memorable. It's a place where I am noting down factual events. It's a place where I do some emotional processing, cognitive processing, and some self-reflection. And it just helps with my overall learning, and I really love this idea. I've been wanting to do this ever since Leanne mentioned that she had this book, and I finally started it the other day, and I'm really excited to fill this up over time. Okay, next up we have this very chunky book, and this is my Happy Mail insert. This is just one insert, so you can see it's quite chunky. I have about I think 2 or 3 pages left before I am finished, and I actually don't even use this elastic at the moment because I don't want to stretch it, but I am using this as a scrapbook memory keeper, but mainly it is just to house Happy Mail that I receive. I don't usually put Happy Mail that I receive in my regular memory keeper because this would be very annoying to write on. So I do save all of the letters and things that I receive, and I put them in here. So this is very much serving the purpose for nostalgia and social connectedness. This one does not get updated that often, but I do consider it a journal, so I wanted to talk about it really quickly. This is my travel journal. And currently it houses my inserts from my Japan trip. I have been very slow to finish this journal, but it has 2 inserts at the moment. The first one is mainly sketches and watercolor. And then this next insert was intended to be more of a scrapbook kind of insert. So any of the little ephemera, bits of ephemera, maybe photos, that's what I was thinking I would use this insert for. But it is a work in progress. I confess that I struggled to carve out time to work on this. I am committed to carving out at least 1 session a month, and I'm documenting all of that on my Patreon in case you're interested in following along. So I'm determined to finish this because it was the trip of a lifetime, and I do not want to forget this trip. And I also want to make use of all the different things that I collected while I was in Japan. So this is more of like on an as needed basis. I would say it's also a very creative outlet for me, and it serves a purpose of triggering nostalgia and happy memories when I think about this trip. The last one, I don't really know if I consider this to be a journal, so I'm gonna say it's more of like an honorable mention, but it's something that I have been keeping ever since I got into fountain pens and fountain pen inks. So I call this my fountain pen and ink log, and I haven't really shared it on my channel in quite some time. The first 2 inserts are my pen log. So this is MD paper, I think, and basically it's a space where I log different pens in my collection and the different inks that I have inked it up with, so I can see I actually have to update this. And I will completely admit that I am not the most up to date with this system. Like, I haven't even finished coloring in some of my pens. It's very much a work in progress, and I honestly am not sure if this is really the best way for me to log my pens, because I just haven't been very consistent in keeping it up to date. But yeah, that's what this is for. And then the last insert, this is the old Tomoe River paper. This is a Galen Leather everyday book insert that I got back in, I think, 2023. And this was meant to be my ink log. So the intention was every bottle of ink that I owned, I wanted to dedicate a page to, and then add some details around the ink. And then when I used whenever I had a pen that was inked with it, then I would write down the pen itself so that I could compare how the ink looked in different pens. So I think the idea is nice, but I've just been so forgetful about actually updating this book. I'm not convinced this is the right way that I want to log my pen and inks. So I really love the idea, but I think the execution, I think my lack of engagement in this tells me that maybe the execution isn't the greatest. As for the purpose it serves, I guess it's more so just to keep my pen and inks organized. There's not really a lot of emotion here, so I don't really consider this a journal. But for next year, I am considering starting a pen and ink journal just to make it a little more fun and to document my experience with my pens and inks in a different way. I'm not sure if it's gonna stay this way, but I thought I would put it in here anyway as like an honorable mention. So now we're just going to look at them as like an overall ecosystem and chat about it a little bit. So as a reminder, we talked about my 5-year, and don't mind, these are a little messy. So we've got my 5-year that I talked about. We talked about my memory keeper, that was my TN. We talked about my morning pages. Next we did therapy wins, happy mail, travel journal, and then we have this pen and ink log that's sort of on the side there. Let's just say my little cookies. This is me. These are my needs. So we talked about processing experience, building resilience, and preserving memory. So looking at all of these together, it kind of helps me see like which ones fit into which of those needs. So we have my 5-year, which is very much like factual events, what happened, what led to the event, what was the outcome. So it's very much like just stating the facts, not really a lot of emotion. And I think this one's really helpful for understanding growth. So it can be helpful for processing experience and even building resilience, I would say. Then we have something like my memory keeping TN. It's very much for preserving memory. This one really touches on nostalgia and that social connectedness. I just have some notes here that I'm just going to reference. I thought this quote was really interesting from this article I read where it was saying, nostalgia is a psychological resource that people can utilize to counter negative feelings and experiences. So the fact that I am able to capture my memories in a creative way helps me feel more socially connected, which is good because sometimes I struggle with social isolation. I work for myself. I don't really have a lot of colleagues. I really have to put effort into feeling connected. And this is one way that helps me remember that I have been able to achieve that. It also helps trigger nostalgia, and that can be helpful for countering negative feelings and experiences. So that's why I really love this form of memory keeping so much. Even though it can be kind of facts-based and it might seem boring to anyone else if I'm writing about a memory of having dinner with my family, but that's the purpose that it is serving, and it's definitely an essential in my journal ecosystem. Then we have something like my morning pages or my stream of consciousness, and this is very much expressive writing, which can be defined as a journaling technique, maybe performed for a few sessions about one's deepest thoughts and feelings. In this specific example, they say just 20 minutes per session, so it doesn't have to be a really big, drawn-out thing, but the act of expressive writing in this way has had a positive impact on PTSD, anxiety disorders, depression. I'm not saying this is the only way that you should work to overcome these issues or these types of challenges, but more so consider it as a helpful tool or addition to your overall management strategy. I'm really liking that I do a lot of cognitive and emotional processing. If I'm feeling a certain way, this is the first place that I go into to work through it. This is also the type of book that I might bring to a therapy session if I'm feeling stuck. It's a place where I self-reflect and it just brings me clarity. So I would say already, like, these are my most essential. Could only have a few, it would be these 3. Next, we have Therapy Wins. This is a very new journal to me, so I really only have a few entries in it. It's too early to say that it is an essential piece of my journaling ecosystem, but I expect it will be, especially because I do not journal about my therapy wins in any of these other books, mainly because my professional life and my personal life I do like to keep separate. And I would say that I never had a formal journal for professional wins, but I did have a document in some of my old roles, and that was a recommendation from one of my old managers, is to keep like a personal wins or a brag list, whatever you want to call it. And so I actually think I did have a professional journal of some sort, even though it wasn't a physical notebook, it was a Word document. And I do recommend keeping something like this, especially if you struggle with imposter syndrome, because this is the kind of thing that can help you slowly overcome that challenge. And it's also going to be really helpful for you to communicate what you're working on or communicate your growth with your manager. So it becomes especially useful in, say, growth conversations, promotion conversations, and also just helps overall build your confidence. So I would highly recommend this in general. If these are considered the essentials, this is probably like a little further away. The Happy Mail here, this is very much a preserving memory journal. It's very much about nostalgia. It's about social connectedness. So very similar to my memory keeper, but it's just separate because it has a lot of physical items and I prefer to just keep that separate, but it brings me so much joy to flip through my Happy Mail insert. And then travel journal, very similar, factual events, it's scrapbooking, nostalgia. There's a lot of creativity in these two that I enjoy. So they take longer, but the payoff is a bit higher because I'm enjoying flipping through these when they're finished. And then this pen and ink log, the more I think about it, the more I'm really not sure that it fits in my overall journal ecosystem. So, I mean, I put here, it's not really a journal, but I may change this for next year, and I do consider it a playful space. It's a creative space, and maybe I'll keep a pen and ink journal next year. I'm not too sure. I've seen a lot of examples of people in our community who have pen and ink journals, and I think they're so much fun. I may try to do something like this next year, but I haven't quite decided yet. When it comes to my memory keeping, this book is quite thick because it does have a few inserts, and I'm thinking about potentially not using a vertical weekly as part of my memory keeping and using my hobonichi weeks instead, so that I have a whole year's worth of memories in one book. And then I'll still have this extra insert if I want to expand and put more ephemera into it. So that's one thing I'm thinking of, but it'll still sort of fall in this memory keeping bucket. No plans to change the 5-year, no plans to change the morning pages. The only other thing that I have been thinking about is possibly introducing a commonplace notebook. I have watched so many videos on commonplacing. I totally buy into the idea of it, but I feel intimidated about starting one, if I'm being completely honest. I feel like I need to research it a little more and understand how I think it would work for me. I know that I have a lot of thoughts. I come across a lot of different things, and it would be interesting to house all of that together. Not so much about memories. I don't know necessarily how it'll fit, but it is something that I am thinking about exploring. So I think when I have a little more time to sit down and read into it a little bit more, learn about it a bit more, I think that's something that I will consider. But I honestly just feel kind of intimidated, so that's why I haven't really gotten any further than contemplating it. But I would love to hear more about your system, whether you have like one book that does it all in terms of journaling. Do you separate these things, or are you kind of covering all of these aspects in one book? Does journaling even help for you? Because it's not for everyone. And I understand that, well, everyone has different amounts of time they can dedicate to journaling. They have different needs. So I'm curious to know what role journaling plays in your life. I know I have a lot of books, so let me know if you have any questions or if you have any thoughts. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you're doing well. Happy October, and I'll see you soon in the next video.